I absolutely look back at the events of my life as a battle. There was this perfect storm brewing, and the pain was unrelenting. It destroyed our family, it destroyed other people, and from there on, our family would never be the same. Well, I grew up in a very small town. We felt safe. We didn't lock the doors. I don't think I was aware of the greater part of the world. For as long as I can remember, I loved the Lord, I knew Him, and I wanted to serve Him. And I knew from a young teenager that my path in life was to be a pastor's wife or a missionary. But the thing I wanted most of all was to be a mother. The only thing missing was the husband that I needed in order to be a pastor's wife. Even as a young girl, I prayed for him. In our old house, the windows were low, so at night I could sit and look out the window and the mountains and the hills around us, and I would pray for the man that was going to be my husband. After high school, I went to Bible college, and after I graduated, the opportunity came to move to Florida and teach kindergarten and music at Pensacola Christian schools. I loved being a teacher, I loved the school, I loved the kids. A close friend of mine one day said, "Hey, my brother's coming to visit tomorrow. He's a pastor, a youth and music pastor in Atlanta, Georgia, and I think you guys should meet." And I said, "Nah, I don't think so. I have a really busy day tomorrow." The next afternoon, the doorbell rang, and I went to the door, and my friend was there with this tall, handsome man, and I decided I was not so busy after all. And I said, "Yes, I will marry you." But we were married a year later, and then as newlyweds, we moved to Fort Wayne to serve at First Missionary Church. Mark was extremely personable. He had traveled, he was outgoing. He could walk into a room of strangers and within minutes have them eating out of his hand. And he got very involved with people. He was willing to give up his own time and things he wanted to do to be involved with them. Mark was asked to become interim pastor for a year between a transition time, and he did. And at the end of that year, they asked him to transition into senior pastor. And our family was growing. I was a mother, and soon there were 4 children, keeping our household busy. As our family was growing, the church was also growing and thriving. And we would have 40 to 60 people over to be in our home, to get to know us, to get to know other people. And that became a big part of our lives too. And in 1985, an opportunity came to buy an old home near the church and remodel it. What I would have never dreamed was that there was this perfect storm brewing in my body. I came into contact with something in the house that was a toxic overload for me. All worked together to break my immune system. Each day, each week was worse than the week before. And before long, I was having to spend long hours resting in bed to be able to get up and go about the day. And the pain was unrelenting. I continued to go from doctor to clinics, immunology clinics, and try to find something that would bring healing to my body. There wasn't anything I wasn't willing to try. I was devastated by this. I was prayed for and anointed many times, but the battle was so deep and so hard. The stress took a toll on our family and also took a toll on my marriage. My husband became increasingly frustrated and angry with the way my illness had changed our lives. So as his frustration grew, things began to happen in the church that caused some unrest, and finally he decided it was time to resign and move on. And when he did, he then started his own business. In those years, the path that he was on took him further away from the family and from our marriage. And finally the day came when I heard the words that no wife ever wants to hear, when he said, "I've been with someone else. You're not the person I want anymore. I'm in love with someone else." He moved out, left the family. Just weeks after that, my 15-year-old daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And she rapidly became the sickest, most unstable, brittle diabetic the specialist here had ever seen. And the next 3 years, basically, my goal was to keep her alive. There were many days of discouragement, doubt, struggling to hang on. When I wanted to give up, it'd be easier just to give up and let happen what would. And from there on, our family would never be the same. So those years were years of struggling to provide for the kids, keep my daughter alive, and still try to find some healing for myself. And it was exhausting. There were many times when I felt a panic, because the nights when I would get up when I was so sick and I needed to go to the bathroom and I couldn't walk there. And I would end up crawling along the floor. I can't count the number of times I've said, "Why, Lord, why did you let this happen? Why did you not stop it? You could have intervened at any point and we would not have been so broken and destroyed." I absolutely look back at the events of my life as a supernatural battle. I have no doubt but that Satan was throwing fiery darts our way. There were many days of discouragement, doubt, struggling to hang on. But the thing I just kept saying to myself, to the enemy, and to the Lord was, I will not give up. And I would stand in my bedroom and say those words, I will not give up. And then the Lord just day by day, hour by hour, sometimes it was minute by minute, give me the strength to take that next step. And as I tried to kind of put our family back together, I realized that I had to fight a spiritual battle for them too. So there were some intense years in there where at night when they had gone to bed, I would stand outside of their room and I would call out to the Lord, and then I would shake my fist at Satan and say, you will not have these kids, that I will fight this battle for them. And it was an exhausting thing to do, but I knew that I had to diligently fight against the enemy for us to survive and for my children to survive the events that had taken place. And somewhere in those years, maybe 12 or 15 years into my illness, something began to work, whether it was a medicine I tried or God's touch on my life. I began to notice that I had a little more stamina. I could be up a little longer. And at first it was baby steps. And little by little, I was able to re-enter life and be out. Sometimes people will ask me, did you forgive Mark, or how did you forgive him? And I would say, for me, I had to at least begin the steps to forgiveness. It wasn't something I could do and say, oh, that's settled, I've forgiven him, and I'm off my merry way. It was a constant process, and it still is. You know, there are times, even yet, when I realize we will always be broken apart. We will never be that family I dreamed of having. Mark remarried, and then a few years later, I learned that he had brain cancer. And it was in those last months of his life that we were able to reconnect. The cancer had devastated his mind and his thinking. He often lived in a different time period, which ironically was the years we were at First Missionary and we were married, so it was very confusing for him. I was able to step back into his life and help care for him. And then just weeks before he died, I went to visit him at the nursing home where he was being cared for. And in a moment that is hard to describe even, the Lord lifted that veil from his mind, and we had a conversation about our past, about our lives. He asked about the children, and we talked about that, the wounds that he had created with infidelity and the wrongness of that. And then we talked about the fact that he would not get to watch our grandchildren grow up. But in that time, I promised him that I would finish this journey with our grandchildren for him, and that everything I could do, it would be my goal to see all of them join us in heaven someday, and I promised him that. And a few weeks later, he died. And I don't want you to hate him, maybe a little mad at him, but I don't want you to hate him. But what I do want you to hate is the lies of the enemy that entrap us and ensnare us when we begin to believe them. When those seeds of sin are sown, the path of destruction takes down everybody in its path. And that's what happened to us. Some years ago, I took my little granddaughter to a fall festival hay maze. And we were having a good time going through the mazes, and I was tall enough I could see the direction, how to go through them and get out the other side. But there was one last maze she wanted to try, and this one was enclosed. Like the hay bales were over the top of it too. It was getting near dusk and getting a little darker, and we walked and turned corners and came to an intersection and chose, let's go this way or let's go that way. And the longer we walked, I began to realize that I had no idea of how to get out of this hay maze. Finally, my granddaughter got a little concerned and she said, "Are we lost in here?" Well, I wanted to reassure her. I said, "Oh, no, we're fine. I'm sure just around this next corner we'll see the exit, so don't worry." And actually, I knew we were really lost in there. And ahead of us earlier, there'd been some other kids, and I didn't hear their voices any longer, so I thought maybe they made it out of here. So I called out and said, "Is anybody out there that can hear us? Does anybody know how to get out of the hay maze?" And a kid's voice called out, "Are you guys stuck in there?" And I said, "Yeah, I think we are." He said, "Don't worry, I'll come and get you." So a few seconds later, around the corner came this young boy. I think he might have been an angelic being, and I was so glad to see him. And he said, "Oh, don't worry, I've been through this many times. I know how to get out, just follow me." And so we did. We followed him. A couple of turns later, we were outside, breathing the fresh air and kissing the ground of freedom, and I was so relieved. But I thought of how often my life has been like that maze, and I've been trapped in it, trapped in the despair, trapped in the brokenness, the heartache of life, and I didn't know how to get out. There just didn't seem to be any way. And I would call out to the Lord and say, "Please remove this from me. Please just cut a hole in the maze and pull me out." But that's not the way he chose to do it. He chose to say, "I've been through this many times before. I know the way out. You just follow me and I'll take you out." And I'm grateful for the chance to say to someone else who's broken and hurting that the Lord is there. He will bring the way out for you. You just have to keep following him. Don't stop believing. Don't give up. Don't lose hope, because victory is there and ahead. The tomb is empty. The Savior is risen, and he knows the way if we're just willing to follow him.